Okay, hi everyone. I'm just going to give people about another 30 seconds to join, and then I'm going to start with the introductions, and then we can get kicked off.
James, quick check. I assume my screen is not sharing at the moment.
I can't see it.
How about now?
Yeah, it's perfect. Fine. So I think we'll get started 2 minutes past. So welcome everyone to the AXO Lunch and Learn session for today. And thanks for joining us on a Friday afternoon. Just a couple of house rules before we start. So we're going to do questions at the end of the session. So please post them all in the Q&A box at the bottom as they come to you, but we will invite them to be answered at the end. There will be a recording of the session that is going to be made available probably early next week. And then for any queries on Lunch and Learn, if you could contact Anthea, her email address is axo, so AAXO @axo.coza, and can answer any questions on that. So today's session is titled Putting Confidence and Consistency Back in Your Sales Performance, which will be brought to you by Raoul Monks from Flume Training. So Raoul is the CEO of Flume Sales Training and a global thought leader on B2B sales. I'm sure some of you have seen some of his content before. I definitely have. He's helped thousands of salespeople succeed by encouraging them to change their perspectives and look at the world through the lens of buyers. So this is going to help salespeople change their perspective and design approaches that make it easier for the buyer to essentially say yes. So Flume Sales Training are well known globally on driving measurable sales impact through training and consultancy that they provide to the media and event sales teams. So what we're going to cover in this session, I won't give too much away, but the kind of key themes we're going to look at are what are the main trends occurring across B2B sales in 2023, what sales leaders can do to dramatically affect KPIs and performance, what are sales professionals doing wrong and highlighting common mistakes, and powerful actions that you can immediately take to boost sales and increase your team's success for the rest of the year. So yeah, that's enough from me. Over to you, Raoul, and take it away.
James, thank you very, very much. And hello to everyone that I can't see, but welcome. And I hope you're going to find this a really useful webinar. We've designed this specifically to give you really actionable takeaways. And I'll just say this up front right now. We do have a white paper on what we're about to talk about. So if you want that, then feel free to reach out to me at Raoul, R-A-O-U-L, @flumetraining.com, or ask in the chat. I think we can do that as well, so I can send that through. The other thing is there is an offer on the table at the end of this for a free strategic review with us at Flume. If what we go through here today you think is useful, then I'm happy tailoring it to your business. No obligation, completely free, but it's there for you. So to James's point, didn't want to steal the thunder of what's coming up. Let me take you through the 3 core things we're going to cover. 3 things. Number 1, we are going to visit the 4 key sales challenges that we're hearing across the globe and across the industry. We focus at Flume on working with media and events companies, and we know the challenges that are out there. But we also know that there are ways to really take control of these challenges and drive, as we heard earlier, some consistency into your forecasting, your pipeline and performance. And I'm going to share with you a way of doing that, which is called sales velocity. Some of you who are watching this may be coming with an understanding of what that is already. Some of you may be completely new to it. By the end of this, you'll understand what it is, but also how to affect sales velocity. And we'll end with some tips around what levers you can pull. All of that language I'm talking about around velocity and levers will start to make a lot more sense as we begin. 3 main things we'll go through, and it will be relatively one way at first. But if you do have questions, please put them into the Q&A at the top. And at the end, as James said, I'll answer anything that you put in front of me. And if I can't, I'll be really open and I'll say I can't answer it. But please think about yourself as you go through this. Take notes. There is a recording, but have a think about what questions you want to ask, because I will do everything I can to help. So at Flume, we work with thousands of different salespeople, leaders, And we're hearing consistently feedback about what is tough right now. And I want to just share those with you. One of these comments at least will probably resonate with you. So have a think about which one is most appropriate to you. So we're hearing a lot around opportunities. The number of opportunities, real opportunities, seem to be going down. There aren't enough of them in the pipeline. And as managers, leaders, we often know that what someone says is an opportunity might get a long way down the road and then it will suddenly disappear. And so was it a real opportunity or not, which is why we use the word real. But it's tough to actually get qualified leads into that pipeline. Second thing we're hearing is around ghosting. So we're all coming up against this. So we get a long way down the process with a client, but actually then we never hear from them again. They don't get back to us. It all goes from a this is a certain one to a where on earth have they gone to? So that seems to be happening more and more. And for a lot of salespeople, it's becoming a race to the bottom. So when we do get to the point we're trying to close stuff, actually the challenge is it all becomes about rate. And the final one is that deals are taking longer and longer and longer. And I'll give some insights onto what that looks like at the moment. There are other challenges out there quite clearly, but these are 4 that we're hearing from sales teams. So as we go through the rest of the presentation, just lean into at least 1 or 2 of those and think which one is most relevant to you or pertinent. And my job today is to try and solve that challenge for you and give you some ways of thinking about it that may be different from what you've currently been doing. So I'm going to dive into this idea of sales velocity, and I'm going to start with this statement here, which is a really important statement, and I don't think it's going to be new for a lot of you. It might codify something you already kind of knew, but there are only 4 KPIs, only 4 sales KPIs that will affect and impact how much your teams will sell in 2023. And those 4 map perfectly back into those statements that I just shared just now. So there are 4 things. I'll show you the equation in a minute, but if you get more opportunities, more of the right opportunities, you're probably going to make more money. Pretty obvious. If you can increase the average deal size, you're going to make more money. Pretty obvious. If you increase the win rate, you're going to make more money because you're going to convert more. But the other one is if you can reduce the length of the sales cycle. They are the 4 factors that will drive your sales velocity over 2023. Most of us know what we need to achieve in terms of revenue targets in 2023 compared to 2022. But actually, do we know what we need to achieve in terms of all of these KPIs? Because if we know that, we can work out how to affect the revenue targets. So putting that into an equation, this is a well-known equation out there. If you haven't seen it, it's very worth having a look at it and thinking about yourself. I'll give you a working demonstration in a second. But sales velocity is made up by working out the number of opportunities you have over your sales cycle, times by the average deal value that you're getting, times by the win rate, divided by the length of sales cycle. And that will give you a sales velocity outcome. I'll give you an example. So actually, the example is going to come in a minute. I'll give you a proper example in a minute. So let me just dive into this and show you what the actual research is saying. So this is a state of the industry review. This comes, what you're about to see, these trends come from 3.2 million opportunities analyzed, $37 billion of pipeline analyzed, and 364 of the world's best performing companies, nearly one for every single day of the year. This was research that's done by a company called Ebster and Pavilion, 2 companies actually, not Flumes. And he's not, I've got to say this, is not industry specific to events, but it is global and it is about B2B buyers. And so what I absolutely urge you to have a think about when I share with you this research about sales velocity and what's happening with those KPIs is thinking about yourself and thinking about how this reflects in your business. So let's have a look at it. This is what's going on. We hear it a lot, but let me just show you what the research says. So from that 3.2 million that we talked about earlier, pipeline generated, number of opportunities, down 47% quarter on quarter in Q1 of 2022. You can see it here. Massive drop happened, and the number of opportunities across the globe, it never recovered. So there's a real challenge there. Why is it happening? To James's point, we need to get into the buyer's shoes to work this out, right? So there quite obviously was a lot of uncertainty still at that point due to the pandemic and economic climate. There was a lot of changes around that as well. And because the global markets were reeling and inflation and interest rates skyrocketed, what that meant was a lot of the customers, buyers who were kind of just throwing money at stuff beforehand when they had the ability to, that grow at all costs playbook suddenly was kind of pushed out the window, and people had to focus on saving and reducing the risk of anything they did. So this aversion to risk, I don't want to buy anything that might not work, means that actually when they're approached by your sales teams about anything new, there's more disengagement. There's a ton of other reasons as well, and one of the biggest ones is they're getting bombarded by so many salespeople who are saying we're the best and we're different, and a lot of it is disingenuous, untailored, and just makes people switch off. So let's move on to the next one, win rate. What has happened with the win rate? It's gone down again. Year on year, minus 15% year on year win rate across all of those markets. Why has this happened? So some interesting stats here. What's happening at the moment is that being ghosted idea. The reason that's happening is because people don't make a decision. They're struggling to make a decision. 53% of global deals end in inaction, a customer just not doing anything. But what's interesting around that inaction is that there's two reasons people are inactive in the deal, why they kind of close off. 44% of those inactive deals are down to status quo bias. They stick with what they're comfortable with what they do with their incumbent provider, or maybe it's an internal solution they've got. They stick with the status quo because you don't get fired for doing what you've already done. But 56% of those inactive deals, those ones that ghost you, 56% of inaction is actually due to customer indecision. The difference is inaction due to the status quo, people saying, I like what we do already, we don't need to change. Inaction driven by indecision is someone saying, I want to change, but I'm not brave enough. I'm not brave enough to push the button and say, I'm going to do that, because they're not confident that the purchase will reap the rewards they need to reduce the risk and look good in their company. And there's also another thing that's happening in terms of lower win rates that's affecting it, which is about the amount of people we're speaking to. So one of the biggest flaws in most salespeople's approaches is single threading things. Single threading, if you haven't heard the phrase, is where you have one core contact, a champion in a business, and that's pretty much it. There are more and more decision makers involved in decisions right now. And you can see here, if you're a small business or an enterprise or a medium business, there is a peak number of people that you want to be engaging with and influencing within the decision making, which is going to affect win rate. So if you're in a small business, then you want to probably be engaging 1 to 3 people. But when you get to enterprise, or when you get to medium-sized companies, you're looking at bigger groups here. But what's also interesting is once you go past that number, that optimal number, the chance of winning the deal goes down because there's more voices, more people who can say no. So win rate is affected by lots of things, and you can see here one of them is a number of people, but the other is people not choosing to change or not being confident to push the button and say yes. Then we've got deal value, average order size, right? So again, no surprise, because it's pretty much what all of them are. It's gone down 32% year on year. Why is that? Number one, part of the one on this is that there's more competition out there. There's more people saying the same things as you, saying they're the best, saying they've got the best audience, saying they've got the best content, the best delegates, etc. It's difficult for a buyer to know what to choose, and actually they're having to do in their role, the buyer, more with less. So for the buyer, that creates caution, leading to smaller investment levels. Also means that because everything seems the same, they just focus on price and say, what can you do in terms of the square meterage and the price or whatever it might be. And as a stat, what's interesting is 86% of B2B buyers don't see a big enough difference between one option, yours, and another, because what you guys talk about feels the same as what the next guy talks about or the next girl talks about. And so making sure we're really, really growing the value of our differentiation is key, because otherwise what happens is it becomes a race to the bottom. So the final insight here is around sales cycle. So I said they'd all gone down. I mean, be actually quite nice if the sales cycle length had gone down. It's actually gone up, which is not a good thing. It's taking longer, 32% longer year on year in terms of the sales cycle, which is crazy. Then you think about how much that slows down your sales velocity. It's taking longer. Why is it taking longer? From the buyer perspective, there's increased caution. We've talked about it before. They're risk averse. They don't want to make a mistake, but there's more people involved in the decision-making process, right? 25% more stakeholders year on year, 25% more people who can say, nah, don't want to do that, or no, I prefer the status quo, or no, I'm not confident that we should push the button here. It is really slowing things down. And the average now is, depending on the research, 10 to 11 plus in terms of the average stakeholders. Interestingly, 2014, it was an average of 5.4 decision makers. 2018 went up to 6.8. Since the pandemic, this is your new number. And by single threading the deal, just speaking to one person, you can see and feel the problem we've got there, which is we're not taking control of building consensus and driving change within that business. We're often leaving it to our champion and hoping they'll do it themselves. Interestingly, another bit that comes out of the research is that there is actually an optimal number of people that you want to be engaging with in a company as well. And it doesn't mean that the more people you engage with, the more chance of actually speeding up the deal. So you can see here, you want a low, right? You want a low length of sales cycle. Small companies, to get the shortest sales cycle, you want between 4 and 6 influencers. Medium companies, where you're selling medium-sized solutions, you want between 7 and 9. And again, it's the same here for enterprise as well. But once you start getting above that, then it slows things down, because there's, again, too many cooks, too many opinions, and too much pushback. So that's the insight into the market. And what I want to share with you now is kind of how you can take control of that. What can you do? Because the buyer's world is more difficult than ever before. And what's interesting that we'll see is actually sales experience is often creating some of these difficulties, right? So back to that sales velocity equation, I showed it to you before, that sales velocity equals number of opportunities times by win rate times by deal rate divided by speed of sales. So let me give you a working example. This is completely fictional as numbers, but let's just play this out and show you how you can use it. So let's say in 2022, sake of argument, you made $30 million, pounds, whatever the currency is. Okay. And the way you did that, when you break it down in terms of sales velocity, was we had 400 opportunities with an average of 65K deal value, quite a high deal value, depending on your market. Win rate was 58%, higher than average. And 6 months is how long it took to get one of these things in. What you can see here is that got them to the 30 million, but their sales velocity every month was 2.6 million. So that's what it was. Let me show how, if you had a target like this for 2022, but now you have a target like this for 2023, how can you take control of your revenues? How can you put predictability and forecasting that's actually accurate back into your playbook for the year? Because knowing you've got to make that gap is one thing. Knowing how you're going to make that gap is another thing. So this is 2022. We've just shown you this, but let's have a think about how do we get from there to 52 million. Let's play this out. If you increase the number of opportunities, let's increase it by a little bit, because actually maybe what you want to do is increase the quality of those opportunities as well. So we'll add a few to that, right? So we're just increase that by 1%. You can see here already, just by increasing that, it's gone from 2.6. It's gone from 30.4. Let me just get this right. 30 million up to 30.4. You increase the average deal value. I mean, that's gone up quite a lot there, but up by 53%. Suddenly, the difference you got there, 16 million, just by increasing that. Imagine that went up by 10%. You're still going to get a 4 to 6 million increase by focusing on this lever. You want to increase deal rate by 12%. you've suddenly gone from 46 up to 52. But let's say we also want to decrease the sales cycle from 6 months, right? From 52, do it by 17%, gets you to 63. Now, these are fake figures, and I'm not saying this is exactly how you should look at moving yours. You might want to move that by 10%, you might want to move that by 15%. But by knowing that you've got this gap of 30 to 52 million you've got to get to, and that these 4 levers are going to be the things you need to focus on to get you there, you can start to forecast, hypothesize, and work out what you need to do to help you get there. So let's have a look at what makes a difference, because there's different ways to pull these levers, right? You can maybe for number of opportunities, you might want to hire people, or maybe for more people to send out more, I don't know, emails and get more leads coming in. For average deal size, you might want to, I don't know, increase your prices. Like, there's ways of doing it that way, but let's actually look at what makes a difference. So when you look at the research, again, 20,000 B2B buyers, there's 4 reasons why someone buys from you: price, product and service, brand, and sales experience. Now, what's most influential in why they buy is really interesting, because we always hear it's about price, or we might think our products and services better, so we'll really focus on that. The research says that only 9% of why a buyer buys is price. 9%. 19% is down to the product and service you've got. And the reason why is you might have a brilliant product and service, but most people sell in the events industry their product service based on having the best audience, the best content, and the best brand association. If that's what you're used to saying, imagine your buyer when they get approached by your competitor who says, we've got the best audience, the best content, the best brand association. It's really confusing, right? So the product and service, I'm sure it's brilliant, but it's not often why they buy, because everything seems the same. 19% of why they buy is also down to brand. You need a strong brand. In fact, in B2B selling, you need to be twice as emotionally connected to the B2B brand as a buyer than in B2C, because there's a higher risk. So 19% of why they choose is brand, but 53%, you can see it on the slide here. 53% of why your buyer buys is not down to the brand, the product, or the price. 53% is down to the sales experience, how strong that sales experience is that your teams are delivering. And interestingly, and this is from a Salesforce massive bit of research actually, 85% of buyers say they're dissatisfied with the sales experience. Right? So just have a look at that as kind of an equation. 53% of why they choose is down to the sales experience, but 85% of people say the sales experience is not good enough. What's interesting is by focusing on that sales experience and building stronger relationships in the right way, you can increase sales velocity based on the research by up to 633%. It's massive. Like, you think about that in terms of those figures I just showed just then, about 30 up to 52. Increasing it by 633% is incredible amounts of money we're looking at here. And it's all about knowing what levers to pull. So let me show you what I mean. Typical investments to pull each lever. So let's say you knew you want to increase the number of opportunities. What might you do? You might decide we're going to increase the number of heads, SDRs, sales development representatives, people who are trying to get meetings and interest. You might increase your marketing budgets, try and get more stuff coming in. You might increase your investment in outreach, automation, so that you can send more to different people and escalate that. You might invest for average deal size in increasing the prices, or recruiting more customer success reps, or recruiting more account managers, account growth. You can see over here, win rate, you might do more marketing, you might do discount frameworks. Over here, you might overhaul the sales process, etc. But what's interesting is none of these really are about improving sales behaviors, sales experience. 53% of why people buy is a sales experience, but normally this is how we try and tackle these problems. So let's have a look at the sales piece, right? So there are a lot of problems in terms of the sales approach that actually cause the issues we've got here. You can see here the number of opportunities often is affected by poor sales approaches, generic messaging, focusing on your solution, single platform, single touch. The research says that most buyers will not engage until they've had at least between 4 to 8 engagements or interactions. But most salespeople, the research says, give up after 2. But also, they're always done in the same way, just email, email, email. It doesn't work. You need to be where your customers are. So this poor approach to sales affects negatively the opportunities. You can see here how the most salespeople are trying to focus or increase average deal value. We might increase the price of the package, or we might really aggressively hold rate, but that doesn't add any value to the customer. It's no more likely they'll buy off you because of that. Win rate, what do we do? Closing tricks. We might dial up the FUD, which is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. But what that does, it just expands the amount of indecision, because it makes people scared and like not confident to make the decision. Length of sales cycle, what's happening there? We normally do scarcity tricks. If you don't do it now, you'll miss out on. Or we might leave our champion to it, say, hey, get this driven through the business as soon as you can. Or we might write a proposal, but we write it for the person we've spoken to, not the other stakeholders. All of these things actually have a negative impact on these levers. So what does work? These are the different pieces here that have a strong positive impact on opportunities, average order rate, win rate, length of sales cycle. And if you want to do a screen grab of this, go for it. This is all in our white paper. So if you want a version of that, then email me at raoul@fluenttraining.com. But you can see here what actually works for buyers is very different. They need to feel chosen. They need deeply tailored messaging that is tapping into them personally. It is 2 times more likely a buyer will buy from you, advocate internally, advocate externally, pay a premium, and put you into consideration stage if they can see what's in it for them personally. So treating them like a number going in generic just doesn't work. So we need deeply tailored messaging. We need social selling to increase trust. Social selling is not just reaching out to someone through email saying, I want to talk to you about my product. It's about sharing stories, insights. It's about being a LinkedIn extrovert, where they come and look at what you do and see what your purpose is, see what you're sharing. Are you someone who can help them? And on top of that, they need you to be using multi-platform, multi-touch approaches, which don't give up after 2 approaches. You need to mix up phone calls. You need to mix up email. You need to mix up LinkedIn voice messages. I don't know if you know you can do that. You can go onto LinkedIn now and you can literally press the microphone button and record a voice. 4 times more likely they will respond to you than just writing an email or a message on LinkedIn. Using things like Vidyard to connect with them via video. Be different, stand out, but be consistent in terms of your approach. Deal value. We've seen what doesn't work. What does work? So what works massively in media and events is selling with insights to raise the value of differentiation. The insights your customer cares about is not insights about your business. What they care about are insights into your audience. Your customer is only ever buying from you the impact you can help them have on the audience. The depth that most people go to in conversations about the audience is, who do you want to attract? Who's your target audience? But becoming a company who can share insights about how your audience, your delegates, make decisions, how they choose, how to take them on that buying journey, and being someone who can go to their customer and talk about, we are different because we are the ones who actually make it easy for your potential buyer and prospects to buy from you. This is how we do it. Raising the value of what you do by sharing insights, absolutely crucial. Focusing on negotiation where you're raising the value, we're not dropping the price. Pretty obvious one, but massive. And we see a lot of companies right now really focusing on planning around key accounts. I mean, you're going to find it a lot easier to grow and expand within accounts you're already working in than just going for the new business. Win rates, we've seen what doesn't work. What does work? Number 1, focus on qualifying out. Be rigid on it. Know what your ICP looks like, your ideal client profile, and know what questions you need to ask to find out if they fit within the ICP, but also if they're ready to buy. Start using methodologies like MEDDPICC or MEDDIC, or if you want to go old school, BANT, but making sure that we know that these are people who are serious and actually likely to drive all the way through the pipeline as opposed to dropping out late. Co-creation is a really interesting one to increase win rate. It is 10 times more likely a customer will buy off you if they feel involved in coming up with the answer, because they own it and they're much more likely to love their own idea than being told exactly what to do. And this is another one that came out of the research from a brilliant book called The Jolt Effect. If you haven't seen it or read it, buy it. It's brilliant, by a chap called Matt Dixon. And it talks about the idea of if you don't deal with objections, you're really going to struggle. Win rates reduce by about half if you don't deal with the objection head on. But what's also coming out of the research about high performers is that the highest performers aren't just dealing with objections, they're preempting them. They're getting the customer to kind of almost not see things as an objection because they're teaching them about what other customers think at this stage, and almost like veering round the hurdle that was going to be in front of them and would come up later. They're bringing them up early so that customer is feeling really confident that you know what they're probably thinking and can answer the questions beforehand. So we've looked at opportunities, average deal rate, win rate. Last one, length of sales cycle. For a lot of people, this is the biggest problem, okay? So what doesn't work is just trying to speed it up at the very end. The length of sales cycle doesn't start at the end. You shorten it by being brilliant at sales from the very first day, from the very first interaction. So making sure you're multi-threading the deal, going to 4 or 5 different people within that business and really anticipating and assessing their buy-in to change, their buy-in to you guys, how aligned they are with your solution and how influential they are in their business. There's no correlation based again on the research between the level of a person in their business, might be a CEO, and their ability to influence internally, right? You need to be identifying the people who are strong at building consensus and driving change, people who are called mobilizers, people who are good at getting the collective group together. So we need to multi-thread the deal, not single thread. The second one there is around business cases to bring the stakeholder group together. So not writing the proposal just for the person you've spoken to. Writing the proposal for the stakeholders who are going to see this proposal are going to be the people who say, well, why do we need it? And I don't think that's going to work. We need to write the proposal with them in mind, not just for the person we've been speaking to throughout the whole process. And the final thing here, but really big, is we need to focus on overcoming indecision. To do this, we need to start making recommendations. We need to have packages that are created to drive impact, not just make you money. The second thing we need to do is we need to really control the flow of information. We need to make sure that at every stage of the conversation, we're pointing them to information that can help them make the right decision. And where you can, make that agnostic information so there's more buy-in to the authenticity of it. But also, like I mentioned this before, in terms of controlling the information, bringing up the objections early before they do so that they feel like you're in control of what you're doing. The last bit in terms of overcoming objection, indecision, is around taking risk off the table. Don't go in and just try and sell the biggest package ever first. Dip the toes in first. Get them to kind of land and expand approach has a bigger impact. And the other thing, which is huge in terms of events, and it has the biggest impact on the speed of sale and win rate, is managing expectations. Map out a roadmap of what it's going to look like. Sell to them the value of the way you help them implement things in a confident way. Don't underestimate that in their decision making, because they're going to be thinking, how confident am I going to be that this is going to work? If you can come up with processes to help them do it, they're going to be much more confident that they want to push the button and say, I'm brave enough to go with it. So a ton of information there. What we've got on this slide, which is probably the most important slide from today, is what doesn't work in sales and some key areas that does work. And I would urge you to have a look at this and think about your sales teams and think, where do we really win? Where is there an opportunity for us to be even better with this stuff? Because a lot of this is stuff you can go put into action straight away and get your teams to focus on the gaps that you've got in your current approach. So that's the end of the presentation piece here. I do just want to let you know before, James, we look at any questions, and I would urge people, if you've got questions, please put them in the Q&A now, because we'll be going to the Q&A in a second. So any questions you've got from what I've talked about, please put them in there now. But it's also worth saying this, I'm very, very happy to offer 30 minutes. This is a testimonial from someone who I did one of these with the other day, a strategic review looking at what you personally as a team need to achieve over the next year and talking to you about the different levers you can pull. There is no ulterior motive from us. We're looking to do what we can for the events industry to help you guys thrive, just like we have with the UK community here as well. So really, really open to offering you a strategic review. And as you can see, for this person here, made quite a big difference. So I'm going to just stop sharing now and move to the Q&A. And James, I'm hoping you're going to come back in a second.
Yeah, here I am.
Hello, hello.
Hi.
So that was a bit shorter than I think we anticipated. I hope that isn't a problem. But I'm very keen to find out if there are any questions. It doesn't look like there's tons in there, but if you've got any, or if you want to get any from the audience, that'd be great.
So I'll give the audience a little bit more time, and there isn't any in at the minute, but I've made quite a few notes and I thought that was really refreshing, really helpful, lots of insights, and I thought that research and statistical side of it was amazing in terms of, and a lot of it really, really resonated with some of the things that I guess personally that myself and my team are going through around, definitely around length of sales cycle, something that we've really not struggled with, but we found a challenge in terms of and people ghosting us towards the end of that process. And obviously some of the things you talked about there, I've made a note of and definitely will be following up with you on. But I just wanted to, one thing that I found quite interesting was just dig into a bit further about objection handling and what you said around seeing the objection coming. Can you explain a bit more about that? So for example, is that when you approach a company and you think these guys aren't going to have budget to do perhaps what I think they should be doing? Are you talking about that, or are you talking about something a bit more organizational, like I know there's going to be loads of levels of approval in this business?
Yeah, really great question, actually. And it is going to be dependent on each company's situation. But if you almost think about it as it's like a commonly asked questions, or like almost like a troubleshooting guide, you know, that the salesperson has and says, well, normally at this sort of stage, in discovery stage, these are the sort of questions and things and hesitations customers often have. Right. And almost having those in your mind. So there might be, I'm making this up, but there might be a piece in that discovery bit where people start thinking, how much effort is this going to be for me to actually implement? And we might bring that in at that point and say, well, actually, at this point, a lot of customers ask us this question, and I want to just deal with that because it'd be something that comes up for you anyway. So I would just want to kind of dive into that first. So it's preempting almost the thought process that the person's likely to be going through. And often the budget one's a good one, right? So the way of bringing that up is saying, look, at this sort of stage, people are normally thinking, wow, that sounds brilliant, but how much is this actually going to cost? Can I afford it? And you kind of start with that, and then you give your version. The way we look at doing things is every package we build is built to drive impact, and so it's about value. And you can kind of take control of that because you've brought it up. Do you know what I mean? And you're teaching them how to think before they've kind of come back with that objection, and it's just a really powerful way of doing it.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that. Yeah, very handy. I just wanted to clarify on that point. So thank you for answering that. Another thing for me was just around influencers within a business. So my team specifically deal with a lot of big tech firms. So you would go into a Google trying to find the right person. You know that it's a minefield, and they could be based anywhere, and it could be maybe 10 different job titles that are the right person to speak with. You touched upon a couple of bits, but just around account mapping and making sure that you are getting more and more influencers in a business. Can you share some insights in that? Is that more just going back to things you said about social selling? Is that asking for referrals, or is there anything perhaps innovative you've seen from other businesses of how to just make sure that each time you're building on that network?
Love that one. Yes. Okay. So there's a really nice way of, I'm sure you use something like this already, James, and I'm sure many people out there do, but using kind of a matrix to map out your stakeholders, right? So one of the things, the first thing to do is kind of map out who do you know, like who do you know within that business? And by doing that, you'll start realizing who you don't know, and you'll start to see the gaps in, well, I don't know someone in this sort of role or that sort of role. Pretty obvious, but you start with who you know, and that will identify who you don't know. What we then do is we start thinking about what are the different ways of codifying who these people are? Because then 99% of people, salespeople, will look at that list of people they know and think job title. Okay, am I speaking to the marketing director? Am I speaking to the CEO? Whatever it might be. To my point earlier, the research out there shows that in terms of driving decisions, and to your point earlier, James, one of the challenges you've got is around speeding up decisions and quick decisions, right? The amount of people in the decision is going to slow stuff down, but also the ability for those people to drive decisions is going to slow stuff down. So how decisive they are, how indecisive, but also how strong they are building change and driving consensus. So there's ways of codifying it. They're called mobilizers and talkers. It comes from a book called The Challenger Customer. The Challenger Customer, sequel to The Challenger Sale. And it's talking about how there are some brilliant people within businesses who are great at making decisions, and there's some others who are rubbish. And it had nothing to do with the hierarchy, right? So a talker, there's 3 types of talkers and there's 3 types of mobilizers. A talker who isn't very good at driving change and building consensus are made up of the friend, the person who always picks up the phone, they'll give you loads of information, and we all often like ping on to them because we're like, we've got a great relationship with Joey over here. But actually, Joey's not very good at selling on because he's a friend. So everyone's like, when Joey says, I think we should do that, they're like, yeah, but you think we should do everything because you love everyone, right? The next person is the guide. They're the person who overshares, give you tons of information, but we don't necessarily see them as strong influence in their business because they're giving everyone all of this information, right? The third one is the climber. This is the person who's just out for themselves, and they're not very influential because when they're in front of the stakeholder group, they're like, well, yeah, Sarah, you're just all about yourself, and you want to do this because of you, not because of the business. So they're the talkers, which are the friend, the guide, and the climber. The 3 who are really good, which are the mobilizers, are the go-getter, who's like a project manager. They take an idea and they push it through their business from start to finish. They're brilliant. They're statistically the most impactful. The second one is the teacher, basically someone who's a guru in their business, great at storytelling and getting people on board and like gathering around a campfire. And then the third one is the skeptic, who is someone who basically they're not easy to sell to because they push back with questions. But the great thing is with a skeptic, and the reason they're so good at selling on is because when Jennifer, who's been pushing back saying question, actually says, no, I get it, I think we should do it. And they go to the rest of the group and say, hey, I think we should do this. Everyone's like, Jennifer normally hates everything. This must be all right, right? Because she's done that due diligence. So the role here is making sure that we know whether we're talking to mobilizers or whether we're talking to talkers, and working out how do you use these to help you. So for example, you could use a guide to your question, use a guide to say, hey, you're an oversharer. I want to find out all of this stuff. I want to find out who are the people who make decisions, who's most influential, who are the teachers we need to get on board, the friend, put your arm around them, be friends, get them to introduce you to other people. They're great at that. So there's lots of kind of strategies you can start using by working out what type of person you're speaking to and moving your head away from, I'm looking at the job title, to I'm looking at their level of influence, and then using that to kind of work with to help you fill it out. That makes sense?
That's really helpful actually, rather than looking at the job title, looking at that person and how you can not manipulate, but how you can get the most out of them in that sense.
Yeah. And also there's a massive piece here, right, about having a champion. So if you've got a champion, someone who's backing you, saying, look, I want to work with Informa, I really want to do this, being really transparent, saying, hey, you want to do this, we want to do this, help me fill this in. Because if we can't fill this in and work out how bought in these other people are, what our job is to do, then we're not going to get this over the line. So that's not going to be great for you or me. So working with someone who's actually invested in getting this over the line too, and being really transparent. I want to get this over the line, help me. And let's fill this in.
Honesty. No, that's a great answer. No, really good, really helpful. I've just had a question come through from Anthea. This is a great question. You mentioned the call cycle, so 8 points of contact. How do I do this without looking like a stalker?
Hey, I love that question. So good.
Yeah, right. Really good.
I love it. So we use a phrase called professional persistence as opposed to pestering. Okay. So pestering, stalker behavior, be careful, right? But that happens. The reason often why we look how do I phrase this nicely? We can look bad in our approach. It's often because of the lack of, there's a few things. Number one is by being repetitive in the platform you use. So I get emails all the time, and then from the same person, I get another email 3 days later saying, just moving this to the top of your inbox, and then another one going, oh my God, just leave me alone. But it's always through email. We'll get the same thing through LinkedIn, but it's always through LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
It's a massive difference in impact if you start to vary and mix up your delivery approach. And it is, so there's that bit there that it feels more stalkery, to use that phrase, when you're just doing it the same way every single time, as opposed to mixing up the platform. The other thing, a reason you will become or feel stalkery, or it's possible, and this isn't aimed at whoever asked that question, by the way, but the reason why we can feel stalkery is because actually we were out there trying to do something we want to do, which is get them to spend money. But if we choose someone for the right reasons, i.e. we've been on LinkedIn, we've seen their annual accounts, we know what they're looking to focus on, we know what they're looking to achieve, we know their triggers, they're going through this right now, and we are brilliant at helping people who are trying to achieve that and going through this right now. If you've got that belief you can genuinely help them, then it makes it easier not to feel like a stalker. And the difference in that is the message, right? So the message we send when we kind of end up feeling a bit stalkery is, I really want to grab some time to find out more about your business and see if there's any synergies as to how we can work together. You can send that once. The next time you send it, it's like, oh, I've said that before. It's a bit weird, right? So actually, if we are going out there talking about them in the outreach, talking about why it's right for them, what we've seen, and the important thing is offering value. So the biggest mistake people make with their outreach isn't just that they don't do enough of it and they don't mix it up in terms of delivery and kind of that's both in terms of email, phone, all of that sort of stuff, but also delivery, like, are we using video? Are we using phone? Are we, all of that stuff. But the biggest mistake apart from that is lack of value. So we often reach out to people saying, hey, I want to talk. I want to talk about our show, or we reach out saying, look at this, all this stuff about our show. We try and sell the show or the event in the outreach. That's not the purpose of outreach. The purpose of outreach is to sell the value of responding to you, sell the value of engaging with you, right? And as an example, back to that insight bit I talked about earlier, your sweet spot, your opportunity to connect with anyone and make them say, yeah, I want to speak to you, is by saying, hey, we're speaking to our audience. They're your target audience, aren't they? We know about how they buy. We know about how they make decisions. We know about why they choose companies like you. We've got some new research. We speak to these people all the time. We've got groups of people we speak to on a monthly basis and get insights. I want to share some stuff with you that we found out will makes a massive difference to how you're going to be messaging to them over the next year, whatever it might be. But your sweet spot is the audience, right? Talking about what the audience need and selling that as a way to kind of get meetings. And I think the point I'm making here is, if you're just selling the solution in your outreach, you're not going to get much back. You're going to feel like a stalker. If you're selling real value and something that you would pay for if you were them, like, that's where you again don't feel like a stalker, because you're trying to help, not sell.
Yeah, I can see that as well, especially a point around, yes, if you send them one message focused around, do you want to do this event? If you send them another message saying, do you want to do this event? That's when it, I guess, crosses the line being a stalker. I think we talk about a lot amongst my team as well, is just a hook. So like you said, I see you're doing this, we do something similar, or I see you've just signed this deal with this client, you know, and just, you need to perk an interest, don't you, in someone. For their outreach, they need to think, oh, actually, you know what, James has actually done a bit of research, he's put a bit of time into me, so maybe I'll put a bit of time into him. But generic, it doesn't work. And the other thing that's worth saying on the stalker bit is, if you don't say you're going to follow up again in a couple of days on your message, and then you follow up, you feel awkward. But as an example, if you do a voice message and say, I'm going to follow up with this with an email, and that then doesn't feel stalkery, because it's not like that. Do you know what I mean? You're kind of letting them know there's a next stage to this. But it's a really great question, and there's different on how they're currently doing it. Yeah, no, I think it's a really good answer as well. I think a lot of people on this call hopefully will have some value within that one. Another one just come through. Can you please explain the part about deeply tailored messaging in more detail, please?
Great question. So there is a real balance here with maybe I shouldn't have said the word deeply because it sounds like it's going to take ages. But what I mean by it is the antithesis to this is using automation at scale and going out and just kind of sending the same message to everyone, right? If you put yourself into a buyer's shoes, you've all been there. You've had people emailing you left, right, and center trying to get you to buy something or have a conversation with you. You see immediately, you can just feel it. That's not been written for me. They've written that for everyone. And I am a number. And as soon as you start feeling like a number, you're like, I'm not even going to look at that, you know? And then that almost makes you think, well, I know the next one I'm not going to look at because I already know they don't care about me, right? For a buyer, they need to feel chosen. And when I talk about deeply tailored messaging, what I mean is there are different levels of this. So if you have someone in an account map and you're trying to grow that account specifically, let's say you're going after AWS or Siemens or whoever it might be. I know they're probably the wrong companies, but you probably want to put some effort into that, thinking I really need to get hold of this guy here in this position. So you need to think about how to message that person and be that person. Find out what you know about them, find out what they're going through, and make sure that you actually reach out and answer the questions they're going to care about, which I'll come to in a second. When it is more bigger scale outreach, so it's not specific to a specific account, we need to be tailoring at least to their buyer persona, right? So we need to know, okay, people in this type of role, in this type of company are going through this type of stuff right now and care about these sort of things. And we need to use either of those approaches depending on kind of the importance of the account to you to make sure we are tailoring it. And what I mean by deeply tailored is that we're answering the questions that they would have when they receive your outreach, right? So you think about, apologies about the dogs, if you think about the main questions you would have when you receive an email or any outreach, there'd be 4 of them. Number 1 is, why have you reached out to me specifically? Why have you chosen me, right? You need to know that. So that's question number 1. And that might be, I saw recently that you've just done this, or I see that you're looking to achieve that, or I see you've just launched this product, or I see whatever it might be. Why have you chosen me specifically is question number 1 we need to answer. Question number 2 is, what do you guys do? How do I know I can trust you and you're credible, right? So that's where you would talk about your event and what you do for the industry and what you're trying to achieve, and maybe the challenges you solve for people like them. The third question that people need answering is, what value am I going to get out of engaging from you? Not what value do I get from buying from you? What value do I get out of engaging with you, right? And that's very different. So it might be that well, there's lots of different ways of doing that, but we need to make sure they feel like they're getting value to engage. Okay, so it might be that they get insights into the audience and what's working and what's not working, or they can learn from other people who are looking to break into this region of the Africa, whatever it might be, who have gone through it before. We can share some trends. That's valuable for someone. Just hearing a pitch isn't valuable. So 3 questions so far. Why have you chosen me specifically? Why should I trust you? Why are you credible? What value am I going to get out of it? And a 4th one and final one to tailor it is, what do you need me to do? What are you actually asking me to do? And the mistake there that people make with their outreach is we always ask for a meeting. A meeting is a lot of effort for someone to do, and also a lot of risk because they probably know you're just going to sell to them, right? So it might just be you want a response. If you can get a small response from them, they're much more likely to then engage in a bigger conversation later down the line. So make it easy for them. So in terms of the kind of rules for personalizing the outreach and making it deeply personalized, do this. Number 1, tell them the trigger. Why have you chosen now? Number 2, tell them your credible call. What do you help people like them achieve, and what problems do you solve for them? Number 3, tell them the value they're going to get. And number 4, tell them the easy action that you want them to use. That's what I mean by deeply tailored messaging, and that will go to a different level the more important that account is to.
Yeah, that's great. That bit about what are you asking me to do, I think something maybe that, I mean, definitely myself previously as a salesperson, I hadn't thought when I'm sending someone a message, what am I actually asking them to do? Because they could just reply and say, great, thanks.
Yeah.
But being really specific. So yeah, those 4 points I think are really, really pertinent. And yeah, another great answer. We got another question that's just come in from Devi, again, which is a really, really good question about, has the old-fashioned cold call become redundant? We are finding it increasingly difficult to reach people first time via the phone. Do you recommend a warm-up approach before diving in with a call? And Debbie mentioned this is particularly relevant for delegate sales, which is more of a numbers game than perhaps maybe a sponsorship or exhibition role.
Okay, so this is one of my favorite subjects. So number one, I will add to this, but number one, I think the opposite of cold calling is dead is true. So let me explain what I mean, right? So cold calling is dead is something that people kind of talk about a fair bit. And what people mean by that is phoning people up. Now, if you have the number, which is normally the difficulty these days, right? You don't have, how do you get it on mobile? But if you've got the number, what I would say is the amount of cold calls I get now compared to 6 years ago, I get very, very, very few people brave enough to pick up the phone and call me. When they call me, I'm almost like, oh God, yeah, that's so refreshing to actually have someone call me, because you're standing out now by making a call, whereas before you were paling into like the masses of people who were making the call before. So I think we need to be very careful of thinking, I'm not saying Debbie's saying this, by the way, but we need to be very careful of thinking that we shouldn't be phoning. It's different now because no one actually phones. So do that. But to your point, Debbie, map it into a process. So there's a brilliant book, which I can't remember what it's called, which talks about sequencing and how to kind of sequence your approach so that you're warming things up. Couple of tips, okay? Number one, again, some of these are really obvious. Number one, go on LinkedIn, find a person you want to get involved with, or go to like 60 of them who you need to go to over the next week, follow them and start commenting when they're posting on things they do, not about you. Do not comment about you. Do not sell ever, ever, ever. But what you're doing is you're putting your personal brand in front of them and getting them to kind of know who you are. Then you can connect, saying, love that thing you posted the other day, love to connect. That's it. They've seen you twice then you can email and then phone, and then say with a phone message, leave a voice message if you want to, but do not sell on the voice message. Say, look, sorry I missed you, I'm going to follow up with an email, right? But you're building it into that kind of process where you probably don't go in with it immediately, but if you've got the opportunity to phone, do it. Warm them up a tiny bit first, but make sure your reps are jumping on that phone where possible, because it's a surprise for clients now when they get a call. It's sometimes quite a pleasant surprise because everyone else is just trying to hide behind their keyboards.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I think, I definitely think as well, you're right about trying to find the number now for people is always a challenge, especially with a lot of people working remotely or at home. Everyone before had a desk phone and you knew you could get them at certain times. But yeah, obviously, it's a bit of a challenge now, very different. But I agree, making yourself different to other salespeople is kind of one of the key things to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a couple of quick tips on it. So I did talk about phone there because obviously Debbie was talking about it. Some things to try out, A/B tests, see what works best, right? But number one is always pair any phone call you make, pair it with an email. You'll get a much better impact if you do both of those compared to just one of those. Try the likes of Vidyard, or there's loads of other video software out there, but a quick message, which actually is often quicker to do than writing an email saying, hey, sorry I missed you, I'd love to chat to you about our upcoming event. We've got some amazing people happening, whatever, and I'll follow up with an email. But that takes you 15 seconds literally to record it. You need a slightly brave salesperson to get into the habit of doing it. But again, it really jumps out at people because they're not used to it and it feels bespoke. The other tip, and I mentioned earlier, is using LinkedIn, and using the voice notes on LinkedIn has a massive impact in the spike of people. Because if you imagine, whenever you've got a voice note you've not listened to, like, you have to listen to it, right? And then you can see someone's listened to it. So you're kind of much more likely to get a response.
Perfect. That's great. We've got the questions are flowing in now, which is good. Everyone's getting warmed up. So we've got a question here from Kenneth on how to move deals faster across the line so they are motivated to challenge their own red tape approval processes. So yeah, I guess that's just asking, how do we motivate someone to, I guess, take a risk and maybe not push it through their legal team, get it in front of the signatory a little bit quicker?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question, right? So I'll try and keep it really, really condensed. Kenneth, thank you for that. So it's about it's about two things. It's about driving an urgent case for change, and it's about putting confidence in pushing the button sooner, right? And what that means, that urgent case for change, and again, it's like sales 101, so I don't mean to patronize, but the driving urgency, the big problem with driving urgency is most sales reps start trying to do it at the end of the cycle, but it should happen at the very start, where we're looking at how strong is the case here to change for this customer. What happens if they don't buy this? Why do they need to do it now? And that means we need to be having conversations, which are two-way teaching conversations, where we're getting them to talk about where they are, where they need to get to, the problems they've got, the challenges they've got. We've got to really dive into it. It's something that's not explored by a lot of sales reps, how they currently do it. What is their current approach? Who's the competitor, the incumbent there? Because that is their status quo. And that's where we need to create an urgency to change. So if they don't see, and you don't see, a big enough reason why they should do something different now, then however much effort you put in later in the process, they're not going to do it, right? Because they're saying, we can just keep with what we do. Yeah. That's that 44% ends in indecision because there's not a big enough reason to change. The other bit is driving confidence in the purchase. At 56% of inactivity is because people are indecisive. So what we need to do is help them be decisive. And that means we need to be making recommendations. That means we need to be reminding them of the challenge they've got and why they need to change. But we also need to be controlling that information, because what happens is often people spend so much time trying to get so much information. You get in a procurement red tape process, they start saying, who are you comparing us to? And then suddenly it all starts over again. It's like, oh my God. So we need to make sure we're making people confident in this. And one of the big pits of this is de-risking the decision. Sit down with your sales team, sit down with customers you work with, and have conversations. How could we have been better in the sales process? How could we have made you more confident that what you now know is worked because you've come to it? What could we have done there to have made you more confident it was going to work, right? And build that into your sales process. Learn from the people you've won from, learn from the people you've lost to, but really making sure we're putting confidence in there by de-risking. I think it's one of the really important bits.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with that. So yeah, it's a good question. So we've got one more, which will be the last question, because I think, we've got about a stop at about 15:15. So question from Errol. In our observation, sales engagement is more personable and customer BS radar is on high alert and won't give you the time of day.
Yeah.
If you're not authentically engaging with them, are you seeing this as a trend across our industry? I presume, referring to events.
Massive yes, a massive yes. I think that BS radar, I mean, I couldn't have put it better myself, Errol. We've got it as well, right? We can see it, we can sniff it, we can tell when is someone just either blagging it. And what the BS radar is about is someone's why, someone's purpose, and people will see through your purpose. If your purpose as a salesperson is just there to make yourself money and that's it, then the BS radar will go off because they can sniff that you're self-serving. By shifting and thinking, actually, you know what, I want to make money, but the only way I'm going to make money is if I help you make money. And the way I can help you make money is to understand exactly where you need to be, where you are, what's working, what's not working, and what we know about the audience and best practice from other people like you. And we can help you get there, right? But it's having a joint goal, joint purpose. And that is what needs to happen to get rid of the BS radar. The problem is most salespeople are kind of quite self-serving because they're just focused on getting their commission. What has to happen is for sales leaders to help them kind of see the way they're going to get the commission is to focus on what the buyer needs, put yourself in the buyer's shoes, and work out how to make their life easier. Like what would and wouldn't work for you as a buyer. You know, you'd want to know about the audience. You'd want to know how they buy. You'd want to know about other people like you. What's worked, what hasn't worked. That's the way to kind of get rid of the BS radar. So it's a massive yes. We're seeing it a lot. I hope that gives a way of kind of overcoming it. But I mean, one of the reasons for it as well is because of the proliferation of outreach. You know, there's all this automation out there, which means they've got more and more to ignore. And so if you can be authentic, and transparent, put their needs first, and actually do things for the right reasons, you'll get a lot further.
And I think that thing about help you make money, and having that mindset, like you said, not be self-serving is definitely something that needs to come across to every client.
100%.
So
and with that in mind, a really easy way of testing it is if you do call reviews, or if you have kind of cool AI coming into your meetings, whatever it might be, but you do coaching, when you kind of play it back for the salesperson who's been through whatever they've done, say, have a listen to this, but I want you to listen to it as though you're the customer with your BS radar on, right? Where did it beep? And where did they think you're authentic? And what could we have done differently? Like, just get into the habit of making people play the part of the buyer, and suddenly everything is like the Matrix. All those ones and zeros suddenly become really clear. It's like, oh, I get it. I get why it doesn't work, because I probably would have said that's a load of rubbish, or I don't want to buy it if I was that buyer as well. So that shift in perspective will solve everything.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great idea as well, in terms of making people listen back as the customer. I think, so that is it for today. So firstly, just to say big thanks to you, Raoul. I found that really insightful. I hope the rest of the audience did. We've had a really, really good turnout as well, which is great. And just in terms of follow-up, if anyone has any questions, please email Anthea aaxo@aaxo.coza. And then if you've got any questions for Raoul, obviously reach out via LinkedIn or via email. I think you shared that earlier.
I'm just putting it in the chat now briefly. So my email is just in the chat if anyone wants it, and then there is that offer of a free strategic review if you want half an hour with me to go through your 2023 plan. No ulterior motive, but I'd love to connect with you, love to help if I can. So please just email me and we'll get something in the diary.
Superb. I really enjoyed that. I've made lots of notes. I hope everyone else has too. And enjoy your weekends. And again, thank you for your time.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Cheers. Bye.